What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box. Today we're going to take a look at the Assetto Corsa MP4 12C GT3 at Silverstone, which is a all too farly conveniently released combination. Of course, we've had Silverstone for a while here in Assetto Corsa, and yeah, I'm going to move left because that guy on the right will always swerve over and hit you. Yes, I've tried this combination several times now. Just go on the outside, and yeah, as is typical, they are still very stupid, especially on the first lap, but hopefully they'll kind of settle themselves down as we go, hopefully. Just go around the outside there, no problem. Anyways, yes, the McLaren MP4 12C GT3, which obviously brings up the hot topic of how's it compared to the iRacing version, man? Which I'll say, as a guy who drives the McLaren in iRacing, yeah, it's actually strangely similar. Very strangely similar to a very kind of odd degree. For example, I brake exactly right there down into fourth gear, grab that curb, and just go through the corner. Yeah. Now, why is this a strangely oddly timed combo? Well, because conveniently enough, iRacing's GT3 series, where you drive the McLaren, obviously because it's a GT3 car, is racing at Silverstone this week. Which means that as my car that I drive over there, I've been doing a lot of practice at Silverstone. Done a race at Silverstone. And yeah, so I got Silverstone with the McLaren over there pretty much as down as I'm gonna get. And then this puppy comes along. The same car that's largely the similar track. Now, of course, Assetto Corsa has the current version of Silverstone. iRacing has the previous version, which I'm also going to say is the better version because I don't like the new Silverstone. It's worse than the other Silverstone, which was already a boring, dull, drab circuit. I'm sorry, but the home of British motorsports is one of the least exciting British circuits. Sorry. Anyways, that was really not needed. I apologize. But say now over there we're doing a 70-minute race, which is requiring a pit stop. I figured I'd go ahead and set up the McLaren here in Assetto Corsa with a similar type of restriction. Obviously, only a 10-lap race. We're not going to need to make a pit stop or anything. It's a far cry from a 70-minute race. But I've still gone ahead and packed her full of fuel. Still gone ahead and opted for the hard compound tires, which is a choice that they give you in Assetto Corsa that you don't get in iRacing, which I kind of figure, well, in iRacing you're probably running the hard compound tires, so I figure it's only fair. It's kind of strange, that curb there, in both versions, really seems to upset the car in a very strange manner. Like the car just snaps sideways, kind of, but it doesn't. It just kind of starts to yaw, but the tires are still going forward in this very weird feeling fashion. I was always like, that's kind of weird. I don't understand why it's just that one corner, but I don't know, maybe it's just bottoming out, maybe. So that's kind of what it feels like, but it's not. But both versions do that. So probably going to go ahead and say that it's probably not entirely odd behavior. It just kind of feels odd. Obviously seeing how you don't have butt feeling. I should trademark that one. Butt feeling in a sim, things do kind of probably have a tendency to feel a little bit strange. Obviously, I've never had the opportunity to drive a McLaren MP4 12C GT3, which I just like saying the full name every single time because it's more fun to say McLaren MP4 12C GT3, because who came up with that name in the first place? Now, there is a couple of differences compared to both sims, and wow, could these guys go any slower through this corner? For one, the McLaren here in Assetto Corsa is different from the McLaren in iRacing, in the sense that this is the 2013 car, whereas the iRacing version is the 2012 car, as I understand it. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means it looks differently outwardly, as well as the fact that there was a couple of changes. Now, I can't tell you how big these changes actually resulted in the car driving differently, but what seemed mentioned for the 2013 update that the 12C received was that it has a revised ECU, improved cooling, and all that good stuff to make it go harder, faster, longer, as well as different dampers, which I'll talk about that in a little bit, as well as a revised aerodynamic package, which are really the things that are probably going to change the way it drives. Now, I'm not sure what necessarily the revised aero package actually, affects in terms of the way it drives, but I'm just guessing, looking at the car visually and being all like armchair wind tunnel expert, I'm guessing that it probably has a little bit more forward aerodynamic bias. They say that it has improved the balance, which I'm guessing the previous version was probably a little bit too understeery, but from an aero standpoint. But I'm pretty sure I just bad like a sheep. It's bad like a sheep. Oh yeah. But because they do state that it had improved balance for the 2013 season, which I'm guessing is probably what they were doing. So, yeah, there's that. But just a nice little cross comparison. They're both really similar in iRacing as well as Assetto Corsa, and really to strange degrees, to a point where, if you follow the McLaren in iRacing, or you've watched the Road Atlanta video that I did a couple weeks ago. Yes, I'm still driving that car. Yes, I've done a race here at Silverstone, as I already mentioned. Yes, I raced last week at Bathurst as well, but in the virtual car. I wasn't racing at Bathurst, literally. You guys got it. But you might have heard me mention, if you watch that race, the car's very unsettled over the curbs in iRacing. Very unsettled over the curbs. And over there on the flip side of things, on the setup side of things in iRacing, with the physics guy who actually builds the cars and does all that stuff in iRacing, he came on the forum and he's like, yeah, the baseline setups are not right at all. I don't build the baseline setups because it'd take too much time for me to build the baseline setups, and I'm not a setup, engineer. That's not what I'm here to do. But we have the McLaren 12C GT3 owner's handbook here that states these are some values that you should start with. And then he went ahead and actually included a setup that was as the car would be unloaded from the McLaren factory, which really the big thing, the very big thing in that setup was the rear camber, which was suggested, according to McLaren, to be set to negative 2.5 degrees. Once you do that, it really changes that car over the curbs. So, just a point of interest, I went ahead and took a look at the setup here in Assetto Corsa as it shipped to you, and is at negative 2.8 degrees, which is a entirely reasonable value, I feel. And it's actually not all that removed from what we actually end up running over in iRacing. So I was actually very pleased with that. Obviously if that's what the McLaren handbook says, that's probably at least a good starting point to a certain degree. So if we ended up with some sort of weird camber setup like negative 0.5 degrees or something like that. It'd be pretty alarming, pretty weird. So I thought that was pretty interesting. In terms of setup standpoint, you know, just between the two, because that is something that I find kind of interesting. The McLaren here in Assetto Corsa has more options. For one, you can change the gearing and the differential, which I'm not sure is correct or not. I'm not sure if GT3 locks you into certain gear ratios and all that, because I know that is kind of something that can be done for cost saving. So I'm not sure if that's supposed to be that way or not, or if it's just something that they left like that. You know, here in sim racing, if you want to go to a weird car track combination, you can, which obviously might cause gearing issues. You know, for example, if you took a car like this to, you know, an old version of Le Mans, you know, with you know, miles upon miles of Mulsanne straight uninterrupted by chicane, easy for me to say, obviously you would run out of gearing way too early and the car would blow up like every single time. So it could just be one of those things that they changed just for you know, convenience's sake. But it does actually feel like the gear ratios are the exact same between the two, which makes sense because, again, if that's how the car ships from the factory, that's how the car should behave, regardless of the sim, because that's kind of something that's not exactly difficult. You know, it's not difficult to make sure the car shifts at the right point, has the right gear ratios and all that stuff. For example, I just know from experience with the iRacing version, when I'm on a good lap, I will grab 6th gear right here before this corner before I downshift 2 gears down into 4th. And right here. Yep. I'll grab 6th gear on a really good lap through here. I'll just peg it in 5th. Yep. So that's just interesting, though I found the suspension setup in Assetto Corsa was a good bit stiffer, but I think that is largely down to the fact that in the iRacing version, because of the way it handles larger curbs, we usually tend to run it softer than what would necessarily be considered ideal. These guys are really slow through there. But in terms of driving, you know, the two cars are very similar. As I mentioned, you're shifting at the same spot, you're braking at the same point, kind of because it makes sense. Just go ahead and force our way through there. I'm sure the front end, front splitter on this thing is not expensive at all. I'm sure a chump change. Let's see if we can run down Dan Gooch. Dan Gooch. Now that is a funny name if I ever heard one. But anyways, in terms of the driving, the Assetto Corsa version does have a little bit more oversteer. I actually find it a little bit more difficult to drive. Although the iRacing version had a heck of a lot more of a learning curve. This car was pretty much just hop in and go, although who knows, it could be because the two cars are rather similar. It's just kind of clicked from the beginning and made sense, especially given that I already have a good bit of practice at Silverstone and a very similar car, so goodbye learning curve, I guess. That's my best guess, but there's a little bit less understeer. It is a little bit more prone towards oversteer, which I think is probably largely due to that revised aerodynamic package as well as the dampers. So, you know, again, because they are different cars, I think that they're very... It's not necessarily a true one-to-one comparison, although it kind of feels like, you know, you read, oh, they changed this, so you kind of start from there and then make those changes and you end up with this. It actually feels like there's logic to it. I think I set the AI to be way too slow, to be honest. Just kind of disappointing because they won't take full fuel or hard compound tires. You guys just kind of slow them down to get them to be a decent pace. And here we are going past old Dan Gooch on this Bastion Loeb racing car, who might just be the most underrated driver in the history of forever. I mean, Sebastian Loeb, not Dan Gooch. Just throwing that out there. I mean, seriously, he did win like 15,000 World Rally titles in a row. But that corner, as well as the corner at the end of Hangar straightaway, because, yeah, I don't remember the corners for Silverstone, as strange as that might seem, as popular as Silverstone is. Stowe, I believe it is. Yes. The car just doesn't like curbs. It's good to see the same type of things going on in both sims. It does feel like in Assetto Corsa you do, I don't want to say have more grip, but you fling the car around more. Like there's more weight transfer involved. While at the same time I have less of a feel for it. Which sounds like a statement that makes absolutely no sense at all, but I just said it, so make sense of it. It's also worth noting that Silverstone, the modern version, the current version, has much flatter curbing as well than the iRacing version, although the car over there will take to the curbs just fine here at Silverstone. So even on the previous version, it's not that bad in terms of curb height. And of course, you do have traction control available here, which you don't over there. So yeah. I wouldn't say which version of the car I prefer, but they're very, very similar, and they both, you know, strike me as what I would expect. And of course, I've never driven a McLaren MP4 12C GT3 2012 or 2013 edition, but it, you know, makes sense. Honestly, it's logical. It's, you 2 plus 2 and you're getting 4. Although I do wish that display there in the dashboard would be improved. That thing here in Assetto Corsa has the resolution of an NES, for crying out loud. Which, from what I've read, is something that will be improved though, so I'm not going to get too bent out of shape out of that. It does have a nice cockpit, it does feel very homey. And you know what? I bet I just figured out what's happening over that curb, and that'd be the curb itself is actually raised versus the green grasscrete, concrete, tarmac, astroturf stuff, whatever it is, which it's probably actually grabbing the car, which is why it feels very awkward. Yeah, invisible pit crew, job well done. Ooh, yeah. About time the McLaren wins a race, jeez. So, yeah. Yeah. There's my little impromptu comparison without showing any. I broke my mic again without showing any footage from the iRacing version, but you've seen the iRacing version. You've seen it here on this channel. You can go ahead and look for it if you'd like. But yeah, it strikes me as a very believable, you know, this is what the car would drive, and in relation to the iRacing version, you get the same thing going on, except for, you know, the curbs, which are a little bit less extreme here in Assetto Corsa, you know, and as well as the way the car handles them. So, yeah, yeah, I like it. I like it. I like this car. I really do, because I don't know, for some reason I just like the McLaren. So yeah, I buy.